Welcome everyone to this conversation that matters workshop that we have today, where our topic today is change as a choice. This event is hosted by the Information Knowledge Strategy program at School of Professional Studies at Columbia University. My name is Nara Altman. I will be the moderator this afternoon, and I'm a lecturer at the IKNS Information Knowledge Strategy program, where I teach leading collaboration. My background is in engineering. I'm a chemical engineer. I also graduated from this program 6 years ago now. And most of my professional life, I managed an engineering company and I directed engineering projects serving the mining industry. I'd like to tell you that this event is recorded, and we'll start with some questions, and then I welcome you to add questions to the Q&A as well. And we will try to address as many as we can this afternoon. We have with us Julie Langford, Beatrice Opoko Asari, and Carla Reinfeldt Miller. Julie, I'll start with Julie. Julie Langford is an alum from this program. We graduated together, and she's also the director of Nike North America Marketing Technology. Julie is an amazing communicator and motivator who works to implement Nike's strategic view of expanding human potential in a global world through socially responsible marketing. That is marketing that not only causes organizational growth, but a positive societal impact, building a more inclusive and global community. Julie works in Portland, where she lives with her husband and 2 children, young children. Beatrice is a Senior Director of Global Talent Management, Inclusion and Diversity at Newman Corporation, the world's largest gold mining company. She's a charismatic leader, a change maker, and her role involves partnering with the board of directors, executives, and each operating region to build an inclusive workspace where everyone can thrive. Beatrice has been recognized as one of the top 25 most powerful women in business by the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce and one of Elite 100 Black Women in Corporate America by Diversity Women magazine. She holds a graduate degree in environmental science, a certificate as a senior professional in human resources, and has graduated from Yale School of Management Women's Leadership Program. She lives in Denver, Colorado. Carla is an international banker with experience in multiple countries, US, Brazil, Korea, and China. She also has experience in various departments within the banking business. Today, her primary responsibility is to support Citi's country heads, the leaders of 96 countries where Citi has a local presence. Carla is passionate about family, education, business, and equality. In the diversity and inclusion space, she has held multiple employee resource group leadership roles across different affinity groups, Latino heritage, disability, and Citi Families Network. Carla has also a self-publishing business which focuses on journals, A Day to Remember. She currently lives in New York City. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I would also like to share that they are speaking on behalf of themselves and not on behalf of their organizations, but we thank their organizations for allowing them to be here and sharing their knowledge with us. I would like you to start answering the question to the panel, and you may add some of your bio as well, professional or personal if you would like, but answer the question, what got you started on this path, the path that you are currently working on? And Julie, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Nara, so much for the invitation. I'm so thrilled to be here. I would say really on the professional front, it was a mentor of mine when I was 18 years old in a mostly male-dominated career of knowledge management. I was working for the US Army, and he saw something, whatever that something is, a spark in me, and said, while you, Julie, are on the communications path, I really see you with this technical mind, and how can I amplify that? So he supported me for the next 4 years in the world of knowledge strategy and knowledge management, even making me do coding in XML in Notepad, which was a bit of a shock for me, but a really good opportunity for me to learn how much I love about connecting the world, whether it's taxonomical design or it's more about building and bringing people together for change. So I would say for me, what got me started is someone seeing something in me and giving me opportunity and sponsorship to further. I would say the other driver for me is my personal experience. So on my mother's side, I'm the first of my family not to live on tribal or governmental support. As an Indigenous woman, that's a huge accomplishment. And I'm thrilled to raise awareness as well as offer opportunity for women through Nike's Women of STEM and Nike's DEI efforts in order to make sure that others have pathway cleared for them.
Thank you, Julie. Beatrice, would you like to share?
Thank you, Nara, and what a fantastic story to share, Julie. So unlike Julie, I did not have anyone to direct me into the path that I went into. I really wish, I did, and it's really one of the reasons why I continue to do this work every day, because I feel, there's so many things I know about my career today that I did not know when I was in high school or in college, and I wish I knew those. So I accidentally got into environmental science. That was the course that I was offered in college. And in my mind, I thought it would be cool. And, at the orientation, there was a gentleman who was the head of the environmental department, who for Anglo Gold Ashanti, who was the person that our university had brought to come talk to us. And he looked very happy. He looked very calm. And he just looked like somebody who was really enjoying life, the soft life. He was very calm. And I thought, well, maybe I may not be in the wrong profession after all. He does not look stressed. He looks like he's doing something really good. And he talked about the environment and the work that they're doing to ensure that even after mining, the environment, the rehabilitation that happened, and he showed the pictures of places that looked like no mining had happened at all. And I thought that was pretty cool. So that's how I got into environmental science. But how I got where I am today also was just by saying yes to different things that did not really align with my career. So as an environmental scientist, I said yes to safety and moved from the environmental department into safety. Spent some time there underground, on surface mines, did a lot of audits, inspections, and then did a few trainings as well. And then I said yes to human resources and moved from safety into human resources and into talent management. So for inclusion and diversity, again, it was, saying yes to, could you lead our efforts globally when it comes to inclusion and diversity? So these are the two ways that, I got where I got to today.
Thank you, Beatrice. Carla, let's see if you have those yes stories and opportunities as well.
Yes, hello everyone, and thanks again for this invitation to be here today. For me, I will emphasize that sentence, you can't be what you can't see. I assumed that I would be a doctor one day because my parents are doctors. I grew up with that idea until I became an exchange student here in the United States. I'm originally from Brazil. And as an exchange student, I was exposed to a student club called the Future Business Leaders of America. And that's when I got introduced to the world of business. And that really triggered an interest. And I started to just navigate what I could do so that I could get into business. And getting into college later on in Brazil, my school was really strong in terms of finance and entrepreneurship. And that led me to have access to opportunities in the financial services industry in Brazil, which over time led me to where I am today. In terms of diversity and inclusion, I started getting involved in groups such as women employee resource groups. At Citi, we call One Citi Women, and Latino Hispanic employee resource groups, initially to get to know people and, to feel part of a community, which is one of the goals that we have, to support our members and to make them feel that they belong. But very quickly, I understood that I could add value by raising my hand to implement a new idea, a new project. And also I saw opportunities in which I could already empower or provide some mentorship to some of the members. And gradually I got into my roles to actually lead those groups. To give a very quick example, when I was in China, one situation was that around the age of 25, a lot of the ladies would start thinking about getting married if they were not already, because their families were pressuring them. And it was a moment that many female colleagues would drop their careers and leave the marketplace. So with my experience, which was diverse simply by being not Chinese, by being from Brazil and coming from the United States where I had some of my studies, I could encourage them to try to conciliate both things if that was their desire, and not necessarily try to comply with what previous generations did. And so, gradually introduce the idea of equality and to pursue your own dreams. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Carla. That actually leads to the next question I had in mind, to conciliate those things, like how do we conciliate our values with the role that we play in our organizations? So the question is, have you been able to find alignment between the changes that you hope to see? Carla just mentioned some of them, and the work that you do. And can you explain how you achieve that alignment, and or give some examples? And Carla, maybe we start with you, since you were starting on that journey. You just gave an example.
Absolutely, yes. So I will give you an example of my current role. And as you shared, I provide support to cities, country heads in several countries. And what I can tell you is, whenever I see that there is a gap into the representation in the society, be it the number of female in the bank, not only as a whole, but in terms of seniority, or in some locations, it will be in terms of racial representation. In Brazil, we have a large number of Black citizens, and if we don't have that number in the company, what can we do to address that? I'm very passionate about inclusion, so I learned about many strategies that can come from recruiting different places, from how you market the positions, and also how to, in terms of education, fill in the gaps. So that's one example that I do almost every day when I'm dealing with the countries, because really cities' goal, which is very aligned with mine in that aspect, is to reflect the representation of our society inside our companies, in each of the locations where we do business. So that's one example. And to give you another one, I'm learning with all the sessions that I attend to. I am trying to embed the idea of female empowerment, both in myself and in others here in the United States. So that's not linked to my work with the country heads, but when I talk to my friends at Citi, my colleagues, and even friends in other companies, previous classmates from my business school, I'm always supporting my colleagues in terms of negotiation, trying to get them to grow in their careers, and also in a way encourage salary transparency, which I believe is key for pay equality.
Thank you, Carla. Julie, you mentioned you work along those lines as well, right? With women and girls in STEM, with the Indigenous community. Would you like to share some of that?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I started at Nike 6 years ago in innovation, and then moved over into the retail brand technology space, and then now lead up our technical product team for marketing technology. I think in all of those, it's really about taking an idea, obsessing the user persona, and then taking it to scale. And somehow that's evolved to be my superpower, is how do we take it to scale? So whether we're looking at a Women of STEM initiative, which like you, Carla, and Beatrice, like the power of saying yes, I started coming to Women of STEM sessions because I wanted to be part of the community, and then soon found that there was opportunity for me to contribute. I took on the collaboration committee lead, which Nara and I have in depth through our IKNS study collaboration. So it was an easy fill for me. And then started leading that group and led for 2 years. I think where then the evolution led was around how do we take the voice, we call them athletes, so forgive my Nike speak, but how do we take our employees' voices and amplify them and help us drive at scale the culture and the policies and even the technical stacks that we want to see, where diversity, equity, and inclusion is at the center of that. And so probably 2 years ago now, I started actually implementing much of the work that Nara and I and another teammate from Colombia had used to really think about how we would use communities of practice more with a deliverable attached. So we called them COAs, and we stood up a task force that was meant for our technology team, where we could actually look at different work streams that we had identified as opportunities to create change. And we found volunteer leaders who would do this. This was all on their own personal time outside of their day job, but often was heavily influenced by the work that they did every day. So through that, we had 9 work streams. There was one that was a bit miscellaneous, the catch-all bucket, but they were all assigned deliverables where we could move the needle on different agendas, whether it was supporting our teammates, whether it was driving the technical stacks and helping amplify our talent acquisition efforts. It was really wonderful, and it's evolved now to a DEI council and a task force where we're continuing to amplify the voice. So at a grassroots level, how can we understand what our teammates are experiencing every day and where we might have opportunity to innovate something like a mentorship program, where maybe they want to have more visibility to senior leaders and what they do every day. We can play matchmaker across the entire organization and help align our teammates' values to the companies. And we've really seen some beautiful partnership there.
Thank you, Julie and Carla. We talk about the title of this conversation series is Change as a Choice. And we like to talk about the conversation, the reflection, and the action. And both of you really started giving a lot of examples of the action. So that's very exciting. Beatrice, let's hear from you on that question.
Thanks, Nara. So for me personally, just a quick story. I have 2 young kids. So my daughter just she turned 10, and my son is 7. And to be in an industry that is so male dominated, so in the mining industry, women make about 8 to 10% globally of the entire industry. It can be overwhelming, right? So for me, the alignment that I see is that when my daughter grows up or when my son grows up, I want them to have a different experience. I want them to have the experience of my dreams. I want them to come home after their first day of work and be telling me about the things that I was dreaming about, the things that, as a woman in mining, the first time I went to a mine site, the PPE I was given did not fit me. I'm 6 foot tall. And, it was a men's uniform that was given to me. And I had to take it to be tailored so it would fit me. And it was the norm. I did not even go ask for, a female uniform or a uniform that would fit me. In my mind, I was like, well, if I wanted it to fit the way I needed it to, I'm just going to take it to the tailor and have it altered so it will fit me. Right? I want them to get there, and when they hear that story, be like, what? That really? Like, that happened? Like, I want that experience to be very foreign to them. And the second one is that when they ask me what I did differently, I want to be proud of what I say to them. Right? So that, for me, that is the first piece for me. Impact is more important to me than anything else. I want to be doing impactful work. If you look at my career from environment into safety into, talent management and inclusion and diversity, that brings me a lot of joy. So the impact piece is where I find alignment. The second piece is innovation. I get bored very quickly. I love new things. If you have an idea that is crazy, I'm like, tell me more. Like, even if it would not happen, that's the reason why I love animation, because it's only in animation that, somebody jumps and they stay in the air for like 20 minutes or like, a minute before they actually realize they have jumped in the air and then now they are falling, right? It's the imagination about it and being able to do different things and experiment with new things. And I get to do that as part of my work. So 2 years ago, I convinced our leadership to go on an experimentation journey globally to test the impact of blind resumes, to test the impact of diverse hiring slates and diverse interview panels, and to test the impact of the use of an augmented writing platform to write more inclusive job postings. And, that was very different because usually as an industry, because safety is key, we want things that are tried and tested. And this was very different from, what we do in our organization. But we also wanted to do that social experiment. It was one of the highlights of my career. I had so much fun setting up the experiments, setting up the control groups and measuring and getting data to actually know that these things work in different ways in different countries where we operate. So the impact piece, the innovation piece is really important to me. And then I think lastly, it's just an opportunity to do something in society. And I get to do that every day as part of my work, being here with amazing women like all of you, being able to share my experience, being able to pass on what I have learned to other people so that their journey is a little bit easier than how I found mine. So those are the three ways that, I have found alignment in some of the work that I do.
Nada, can I jump in very quickly?
Yes,
Linking
please.
to the theme of International Women's Day and, the break the bias, I just want to make a connection to what you said about innovation. I had one experience in which, in a previous role that I had at Citi, startup founders would come and present about their technologies, all blockchain-based technologies, companies, and a panel would assess whether this is a solution we would like to use at Citi or not. And one experience really became remarkable to me because all of the other Citi panelists that were evaluating the solution had one opinion that is, okay, we will not proceed with those conversations. However, I was there and I was the only female in the room. I thought that there was a huge potential. It was like totally different from their opinion. And I thought their opinions could have been influenced by the fact that the presenter was very unusual. It wasn't a male founder. It was female of Asian background. And long story short, today we are partners with that company. We adopted that blockchain solution. So in innovation space, having a voice in the table and breaking the bias of what a founder looks like and how they need to present the solution to us, it's very important. And I get as excited as you, Beatrice, when I have the opportunity to innovate in that space.
And those two answers, Beatrice talking about the impact and Carla as well about the innovation aspect, leads to one of the questions we have from an attendee, that what are the best indicators or metrics or KPIs that you believe is evidence of an organization that is open to change, to new ideas, new models, etc., as opposed to an organization that is very control-based? Judy, do you want to start with that? You seem to be nodding.
I'm laughing because my answer before teed it up perfectly. So I mentioned the task force and now the accelerator. That was all grassroots effort. That was me going to our leadership and saying, listen, like we have these women of STEM areas where we're seeing areas of opportunity, not just within our ERG, but we really want to amplify and go further, not just in what we do as, again, an employee resource group, but we really want to drive business. So like what you're saying, Carla, around diversity of thought, when we're evolving our products, when we're putting them through the rigor before we put them out in the world, when we're looking at our applications and our .com experience, are we putting accessibility at the center of the table? Those were things that we wanted to continue to foster conversation, but also the governance model of who's contributing to those ideas and how they are tested through QA and how they come to life. And so that was really, I think, a critical factor, was for us to not only tease out, like, this is the business impact, not just the what collaboration feels like on the soft side, but these are the hard numbers that we can prove out if you help us amplify the voice of the employee and the voice of our consumers, and have diversity of thought at the center, which requires all of the elements I've already heard around diverse slate and all of the diversity of teams. I think then that when we talk about KPIs, even then solidifying and putting dollars against that has been, as funny as that sounds, like that's one of our biggest KPIs on the task force and the accelerator, is seeing that the programs and the work streams that we drive out of our grassroots effort actually become evergreen programs and are pulled into the DEI portfolio as a whole, so that, again, that scale process can continue.
Excellent. I love that conversion of grassroots movements into the evergreens. Yeah, that's as a huge indicator of success. Beatrice, do you want to add to that? I know you work on those too.
Yeah, I was going to add, it's such a fantastic point that you made, Julie. I think any organization that is focusing on diversity and inclusion is an organization that is open to change. It is not easy. Just think about putting introverts, let's just use that as an example, personalities, introverts, 5 introverts and 5 extroverts, and you put them in the room and you ask them to solve something. We know what's going to happen, right? The introverts are going to be like, we need to think about this. I'm overgeneralizing, of course. And the extroverts are going to think out, talk to think more about whatever you're asking them to do. Unless you have that inclusion, right, that is bringing both groups together, such that one group is saying, you know what, you think about this whilst we discuss this, and then we'll come back together and we would work together on it. That is hard. But if you put only extroverts in a room, great. Like, we all think the same way. We all get each other. Let's just talk through this. It is more difficult when you have difference at the table, even though it gives you the best outcome, right? So I think any organization or team that is trying to create a more inclusive environment has to be open to change. That is one of the indicators. I think another indicator, especially let's say you don't know the organization and you're interviewing with that organization, is to ask them about their experimentation. Like, what did you last experiment on? Which parts of your business or your team, it doesn't have to be big, it can be something simple, an idea or whatever that might be. What did they experiment on? I think another question, which again, from an HR perspective, if you're interviewing with an organization or you're trying to understand before you go into the organization, whether they are open to change, is to ask them about how you learn. Not in the classroom, but how do people learn in this organization? How do you learn about new things? How do you learn about new functions? And then I think lastly, give them a scenario and say, if I was supposed to do A, B, C, I did my best, but it did not yield the result. In this company, how would I be treated? How would the reaction be? What would people normally say? I think these questions would give you insights into organizations that are more open to change and learning and making mistakes, compared to those who do not.
Thank you, Beatrice. Carla, do you want to add to that question on the KPI and indicators, and especially that you are working so globally? I don't know if you have something to add around that.
Yeah, so instead of talking about KPIs, I'll just say that culturally, for me, a huge indicator is, do you encourage people in a meeting to have different opinions? After the senior person shares about an idea or a project, how inclusive are you inviting others to share their thoughts, even if they are different thoughts, or maybe especially if they are different thoughts? And if we have new employees at the company, either new because they are coming from another employer, another industry, or younger generations, how do you encourage those to speak up? Because many times, we are biased by the fact that we've been there. I've been with Citi for over 10 years now. show how welcome you are to listening to those different ideas. It's not necessarily a KPI, but a culture and attitude that you can have that fosters innovation and inclusion.
I love that focus on the behavior, right? And how much are you doing of that behavior that you want to foster, really? So we have a specific question for Beatrice. And I think you partially answer it, but goes to a very specific point. What were your arguments for diversity interviewing when you presented to management, and what seemed to make the difference to get a positive answer?
So you and I have had this conversation about, when we are asked for the business case around inclusion and diversity, and I can quote many studies and, that have been done that show the importance of having difference at the decision-making table. I love how one of our board members explains it. She says, when you have inclusion and diversity, you make better decisions. When you have inclusion and diversity, you avoid unintended consequences. And when you have inclusion and diversity, you identify risks that a homogeneous group may not necessarily identify. So those are some of the key conversations that we have. But even beyond that, it's just for us, it's just the right thing to do. It's important that in the countries where we operate, we do have representation of the people in those countries and the communities within which we operate at the table. I'm sure you all may have seen some of the challenges that other organizations may have experienced when the decision-making table is not diverse, and out of good intent, a decision is made. And then that decision comes out and everybody's like, why did you even make that decision? It's the worst decision, is the worst product. You should never have done this because you did not have the difference, at the table. So I think we are past the stage where we have to produce the business case for ensuring that you have different voices at the table. If you have responsibility for any business metric, it's important that you're making the best decisions. And in making the best decisions, you ensure that you have that diversity at the table. So there's the moral imperative and the accountability of every business leader is to make sure that they are making the best decisions. And that is the reason why you need that diversity at the table. And that's the conversations that we have. And maybe lastly to add, one of the things that I really appreciate about our board is not only do we end there, we push ourselves to think about how can you continue to improve. You may have done all these things over the years, but how do you go above and beyond? How do you create an environment, a culture? I think, Carla, you mentioned that. How do you create a culture where when somebody is different, they can still thrive in your culture and they do not have to change who they are, and they do not have to try and fit into that culture. They just arrive in your business. They may look different, but they're like, I love this place. I feel like I can be myself. That is what we're trying to go for.
Julie, Carla, do you want to add to that response?
I'll just echo one. I was like, I had to pause from nodding so much or I'll hurt my neck. But I so agree and appreciate your perspective, Beatrice. I think diversity of thought after diversity as a whole often is thought of as we have to just all look different. And that's a critical component as well. Just having had different life experiences and the beauty and interesting parts of that. But I think too, when we think about, like I mentioned accessibility earlier, we all have something that we bring to the table. As a sandwich caregiver, so someone who I take care of my mother and my two small children who are 3 and a year old, I bring a different perspective. So even if we're going to say, let's all get together at the happy hour at 5 o'clock, well, I don't have necessarily that luxury unless I'm going to pre-plan with my wonderful spouse who will take on the responsibility for child pickup and getting them dinner and all the things. When we're looking at how we may work synchronously or asynchronously, there are times when my team knows that sometimes my mother, who has severe dementia, needs to go to the ER, and I'm the only person who can do that. And so being able to contribute not just on the clock at the same time, all the time, but being able to catch up in forums where they're digital. I can synchronize with or asynchronously synchronize with them at 11 o'clock at night if I need to catch up because personal life has gone a different way than I expected it to in a day. That's just allowing us all to take in our holistic view of who we are. But then I'll tell you, like, my experience, while it sounds like it's a hindrance to the business, actually makes me a stronger advocate for a lot of things that we do across our tech stack. It makes me more open as a leader to what Beatrice was talking about. How do we drive change, not just on our workforce, but also in the innovation we do, again, across our product stack. So I think that's a beautiful opportunity for so many to invite diversity of thought in all different factors that you'll be surprised at how much it actually brings to your organization.
That's amazing, Julie. In adding to what Beatrice said, I'll just say, if you can be yourself, passion makes its path. People shine when they are passionate, when they bring their full selves and they have time to work on their projects. And then they don't have to compromise because they are so good at something that they are following because they are inspired and they feel welcomed by the organization. And that's when talent flourishes. So I'm totally supportive of bringing your full self.
Thank you. I love how we come back to that alignment. That was one of our initial questions, right? And how can you find that alignment also in terms of being able to value for things you care for, like Julie gave your example of caring for your mom. So having the company be part of that and seeing the value in that, I think it's huge. So we have another question that now that I think Beatrice talked a little bit about that, but I'd like to hear from all of you on in working in this diverse environment. What was the biggest hurdle that you have had to conquer, and what strategies and procedures did you create in the process?
Now, are you talking personally or as we've
Well, the
gone
question
through the
is from the audience. The question
from the audience.
Not,
okay.
So the question is not specific. Yeah, if personal or yeah.
I'll try and talk about the personal piece first, and then maybe add from an organizational perspective. I think personally, I have transitioned. Depending on where I was in my career, the challenge looked different. So, like I mentioned, when I got into the mining industry, I have 4 sisters. My dad is the minority in my home. And then I go into this industry where now I am the minority. Like, I'm used to being amongst women. I went to an all-girls boarding school for high school. Like, I grew up with women around me all the time. Then I go into this industry that has mostly men. And so that was a difference for me. I wasn't sure if I could just be me. And of course, I do love everything womanly, like dresses, all the things that come with it, or that I needed to change and, fit the mold of what I was seeing around me. And that was more early in my career. And then I think as I progressed in my career, someone gave me one leader gave me feedback and said I was too passionate, and that was going to be a downfall for me. And so I toned down who I was so that I could be more calm and not be too passionate about whatever I was doing. And then, fortunately, I had a different leader who said, you're not being yourself. I can see that you're holding back. And then I gave the leader the feedback that I had received. And the leader was like, what? That actually is your superpower. So, that is your superpower. Like, if somebody is passionless about, anything, you're passionate about plants, like, that is amazing. So go for it and, be that person, and do not let anybody change your mind about that. And I think that was a very important and pivotal moment for me in my career, because to now, that is the feedback I always get, that I'm passionate about what I do. And it is truly me. I'm very passionate about whatever I'm doing, whether it is taking care of my kids or, I joke about the fact that I think I'm the best mom at bath time. I can make simple things exciting because as a working mom, it can be tough. So, whatever simple thing that is happening, I can try and make it exciting. So those are some of the challenges, and the how I overcame them is having those sponsors around me, people who were willing to put their social capital on the line to either give me feedback or draw me to the table or put my name out there and say, this person is great, they can do that job, or just people around me who help me see a side of me that I may not necessarily see. And then currently in my career, I think I'm getting the challenge I'm facing is just like fatigue with small change. I'm like, we have to go bold on change. Like I've been doing small change and celebrating, little wins for a long time. From a social perspective, racial equity, gender diversity, accessibility. Like we've been having this conversation for a long time. And so I feel like there's an urgency around it, and I'm a little less patient around small wins as where I am currently in my career. And then lastly, from an organizational perspective, I think this work is hard. There are people who do not want you to do this work. There are people who are champions, and then there are people who are in the middle and they do not want to take a side. And so change is hard. I wouldn't tell anybody that change is easy, especially at an organizational level. But I think what helps you go through it is exactly what helps me get tired, right? It's celebrating those small wins and ensuring that you're taking more of a problem solving approach to the change instead of a burden, making it a burden. You try to break it down, and that's where my environmental science brain kicks in, and I try to break the change down into small pieces that you can actually be able to address.
Thank you, Beatrice. Carla, would you like to add some about the hurdles that you have faced or that you have seen being faced?
Sure. I will add 2 comments, and they apply both to my personal experiences and to things that I see in the system, let's call it this way. One is related to sponsorship. I think we hear a lot the fact that women find a lot of mentors, but not a lot of sponsors. So finding a sponsor that actually takes you to the next level, that helps you get promoted, is not something that has been particularly easy for me. And I was fortunate to have, my career develop, and I'm growing, but usually it's someone that was outside of the circle that told me about an opportunity, or I identified an opportunity and I applied, and that opportunity was the next level. But a direct sponsor is something that just, didn't happen necessarily for me in a natural way. So I'm still trying to understand how to foster this type of relationships and how to do better at it myself. And at the same time, realizing that this has been my experience, I put it as a mission for me to be a sponsor for others. And in that regard, I can say that I have been successful both getting people from the back office to the front office when I see that they are high performer, promoting female, promoting Latinos, and bringing them to my team, encouraging females to discuss the raise and be successful at it. So I would consider myself a good sponsor. And I put an effort on that actually, because I want my career to be fulfilling to me, as you both ladies said, and to be able to tell my children that I made an impact in people's lives. The other aspect is motherhood or parenthood. I'm also a mother of 2 children, and the transition to motherhood and how you conciliate that in your career also came with a few hiccups, I'll put it that way. But I realized soon enough that actually I'm better as a working mom than if I had chosen to be a stay-at-home mom, because taking care of children is also tiring. And I like my career. I like to interact with adults and to get a Starbucks coffee in the middle of the afternoon. So I feel like I'm more present with my children if I spend a few hours, away doing other things that I'm passionate about and making friends. So I became very engaged in that space. And actually, I currently lead the New York chapter of Cities Families Matter Network, which is related to caregivers. And, many of those are parents. And yeah, that's, I think a lot of us face challenges. Some come from inside and our own self-beliefs and how our families were raised. Other challenges that parenthood brings come to how our managers and our colleagues perceive us and the bias that they carry. And I try to, be engaged in helping others in both aspects, not only how to discuss with their managers and break those biases in their environment, but also how to self-empower yourself and understand if being a working mother or father or caregiver is what you want to be and how to succeed at it.
Julie, would you like to share as well some of the hurdles that you have observed, either personally or that you have seen happen?
Sure. 6 years ago, I recall going into a conference room, serving as the technology or the technologist in the room. And a gentleman, an older white male, said, "Oh, are you the admin here to support?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm your technologist here to give you a solution." And I recalled just being a bit, I don't know, caught off guard by that, but certainly trying to, pull in the reins and then not, I don't know. I don't know if anyone else on the call has experienced it, but where you kind of put your shoulders back and you say, "I'm here." And you suddenly want to prove that you've got some sort of competency that for some reason they didn't feel when you walked into the room. And so I think to that end, what Carla, you mentioned it earlier, there's something wonderful when you have ability to see that and then achieve that. And I think over the last 6 years, what's been wonderful seeing not our society, certainly in the US, and then seeing it across Nike as well, as we've amplified female leadership and really shown and highlighted what women are capable of doing, that we can, in our world, we're calling it STEM strong, like your STEM is showing, whatever, like being fun with it. I think being able to showcase that, especially again, from the Nike, we're making sport a daily habit. We talk about you can be an engineer or a technologist and work out, and you can have these different flavors of how you show up. So Carla, whether we're wearing the mother hat or we're kind of have the baby on the hip as we're providing a solution, because we're remote work from home or something. I think that's what's interesting is, again, bringing that holistic view. So that's what I'm grateful for, having hurdled that. And so now I certainly don't face that. Maybe that's just with age or something. They don't see me as looking as youthful, but I think that has really helped to pull out what a technologist can be, what an engineer can be, and being able to see that it can take all sorts of shape. I'm forgetting the second half of that question, Nara.
Yeah, it was mostly about hurdles you have seen in this diverse space, right? I guess because all of you have been the diversity, the hurdles are your own. Yeah.
The other portion that comes to mind for me was when I worked in innovation. Someone said offhand, they were talking about their child who was becoming a university student and taking on internships. And they said something about, well, I have to make sure they stay focused so that they can show that they have a linear career path. And that struck me because the Indigenous community and many others as well don't often have a kind of linear career path. I think, Beatrice, you highlighted that. I had worked 4 jobs in college to be able to pay for college. If that showed up on my resume, I would look quite unfocused, when you actually would find that I'm very resilient, that I'm very determined, that I can overcome adversity to accomplish and get into what I need to do and see it thrive. I think those are misnomers that often have bias attached to them. And so those are the types of hurdles that, again, I think as we amplify voices and are able to share stories, it opens people's eyes to understand where policy, procedure, even technical, when I think of I'm sure Beatrice has a lot to say about the talent pools and how we maybe even capture those resumes and synthesize them at scale. There's a lot of interesting topics that we could go to that. But even just, again, from a hiring manager viewpoint of saying, maybe I don't always have to consider linear career path because I know that there's a human and a story attached to that.
I love that. Beatriz had talked about the blind resumes, and I think the linear resumes are still a hurdle in the process out there for a lot of women and other communities, as you mentioned. We're starting to get 10 minutes to the end, and we're starting to get more towards like, what advice can you give, right? Maybe people work on organizations that are not as change forward as the ones that you are currently on. So we actually have a question from the audience that aligns with that. And it says that Brené Brown recently shared that talking about power and leadership, advocating for employees, not as much about giving voice to the voiceless, but giving ears to the earless. And I think Beatriz talking about that need for both change might align with that as well, right? So how do you lead up and encourage decision makers to take the actions that encourage diverse voices and needs of employees into the room? I guess, how do you open leaders' ears? That will be the question. And any of you that want to jump in first?
Educate those leaders. I'll say very quickly, educate, have conversations, let them be in environments in which they can break their bias naturally just by observing people perform, people that they have a different expectation. And finally, advocating for policies and changes in like internal processes that hinder that.
What I would add is that if you're in a position of power, use it. Right. So if you are somebody who can hire, you can coach, you can decide what somebody's performance, looks like, you can set expectations for a team. If you have that power, use it. You may not be using it upwards, but using that with your team and setting those expectations, that definitely helps. And what I would say is, do not underestimate the power of immersive storytelling. Put your leaders with 5 women or people who are different from them, people who do things different from them. So I think, Julie, you talked about being, a sandwich caregiver, and I'm thinking about it. I was like, oh, yeah, that is very different, right? So allow leaders who would maybe only set meeting times at 6:30 a.m. to meet with people who are doing something at 6:30 a.m. Like they are either caring for their kids or they're caring for, grandparents or parents or whoever that may be. It's really powerful. Recently, last year, I challenged some of our leaders to engage with, women in operations, and it was powerful. The stories that they came back to tell, I could never have asked them to do what they wanted to do on their own without those stories. So I would say definitely do not underestimate the power of stories. So if you have a BRG, create a small focus group and, allow your leaders to listen, listen to the people, come up with some curated questions and continue the conversation.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Nara. I think, it comes to mind that we're at our best until we know differently. And I think that that's really important, like the knowledge sharing piece, if we bring it back to IKNS, it's so important to think about what the leadership and what your community, wherever they can be found, we spoke earlier about values, but where that aligns and how you can amplify that by what you're seeing and where you want it to change. So what comes to mind for me is that the metaphor of like being a thermostat, not a thermometer. You can read the room and understand what does this community care about? What sort of, we talked about KPIs. What do they care about? Is it delivery? Is it efficiency? Is it profit? Whatever that might be. And then looking at what you're wanting to see changed and how you might actually align to that outcome that they want to achieve. So if we actually have, and Carla, you did this beautifully, if we have diversity of thought, we're actually going to be more profitable. So can we start there, right? And so allowing the conversation to be shaped differently than you might actually have framed it. But again, I think for us, it makes us better as communicators because we're able to storytell, back to your point, Beatrice, around what they care about and how it aligns to the company's values.
Thank you, Julie. And we have one last question that I think we were going to have time to address. The question specifically if there is unintended consequences for women now that we're working in remote mode. And I'll just broaden it a bit to see if you can say something about what changes in terms of this process now that we are mostly remote. What are the advantages and the disadvantages of that?
I have loved remote working. I don't know about anybody else. I had never worked remotely, and people used to talk about it. I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. I never enjoy it when I work from home once a month or whatever. I definitely struggled the first 6 months trying to figure out, like, how to do this, but I really love it. I really enjoy working from home. I feel I can be myself. I can laugh when I want to with my colleagues. If they say something funny, I wanted to just laugh or do whatever. It's great. And the flexibility is amazing. I think it has been great for me. I think the unintended consequence is the proximity bias, right? Once you go back into hybrid, work environments, and you don't go in as much, you don't get their attention and you do not get their engagement. And if somebody needed someone and Julie was right there next to them in the office, it was going to be Julie because, of that proximity. So I think that is one of the unintended consequences, of the hybrid working environment or just, virtual working environment. But I personally have really benefited from working virtually.
I'll say +1. You can't see, but I have a Peloton right here. And after this, I'm going to be on a meeting and I'm going to be on it while I'm on that meeting. So I'm very excited about the flexibility and maybe strength building that it provides as well. I think to that end, where it's actually making us sharper as a team. I talked about asynchronous and synchronous work. We're really diving into the information strategy and how and when we're receiving information of all types. And so if it's coming in as something that we need to qualify as intake and we need to actually put action against it and we need to have deliverables and all of that, it's helping us get sharper around what is our team meant to do and how we do it. And then wherever it makes sense for you to take on that ownership, whether that's 11 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock or whatever, we're trying to really be thoughtful about how we create a system of record for our hybrid model. But we also add in, how do we collaborate? How do we have fun? To Beatrice's point, how do we build relationship in a thoughtful way? It's hard. I don't know. I'm really hopeful that IKNS can help us solve some of these problems and opportunities where we know that we'll still need to consider proximity bias, but I do think there are really thoughtful ways that we can also overcome many of the challenges that we face.
And I'll add that I really love the hybrid work mode, but two things, especially women and caregivers should have in mind is it's much easier to expand the relationship that you already have via Zoom than to start a new relationship. And relationships are, so crucial in the workplace everywhere. So we have to be very deliberative and intentional about starting new relationships, especially if you are 100% remote, so that you don't start lagging behind over time. Because until a few months ago, everybody was remote, but now it's not like that anymore. So we have to be intentional. And the other thing to finalize is to think about a job versus a career, because you could be extremely efficient at a job that you performed before or that you know well remotely, but in the lifespan of a career, if you're not volunteering for, some special initiatives that are cross department, etc., and if you're not there when things are happening, then you start to limit your opportunity if you're working in a more isolated way or just focus on your team members from home. So if you have career plans, long-term plans, you have to be very careful if you're fully remote. That's my opinion.
We're getting to the end. Unfortunately, thank you, all of you. I see some comments in the chat that you are an inspiration. I think you filled my dreams. Beatrice said, I want my kids to have the experience of my dreams. I love that. So I hope this conversation today allows us to keep dreaming and to keep acting today, so that our kids will live in those dreams. So I want to thank you, Julie Langford, Beatrice Opoku-Asare, and Carla Reinfeld Miller. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, all of you from the audience that join us today. I hope this has been a productive meeting for you. If you are interested in learning more about the Information Knowledge Strategy program, please join us on April 20th for an online information session to hear from students, faculty, and alumni about the program. You heard a bit from Julie and myself today, but there will be that special event. You can RSVP on the website or email ikns@sps.columbia.edu. We also host this conversation that matter quite regularly, so keep an eye open for that for the future event. Thank you so much.